Hey, RetconRaider here, and welcome back to Pathfinder Kingmaker, as we continue the on and off mini-series, where we focus on getting to know our various companions a little better. Today we will be focused on Jubilost Narthropple, self-proclaimed genius, writer, inventor, alchemist, and while he's not an active part of our current party, he is one of our kingdom advisors, and he does have some pretty strong ties to the overall story of the game. That said, let's see what he has to say. Jubilost raises his head and closes his notebook. Ah, it's you. How can I help you? What are you jotting down in your notebook all the time? Notes on our adventures. Good ideas that come to mind. I don't know how it is with you, but in my case, my mind is constantly producing thoughts and ideas worthy of writing down. Some I use in my articles and books. Others I will share with the audience the next time I speak at Foray Logos in Absalom. Some other thoughts should be kept out of the public view for a while. Our world isn't ready for certain revelations. Tell me about yourself. I've heard this request so many times. Well, as we're traveling together, I suppose I can give you an interview. Free of charge, of course. Gosh, thanks. Where are you from? All of Golarion is my home. I am a citizen of the world. Some might say my home is Absalom, that great old patchwork city. It's there that my books and magazine articles are published, and there I am held in particularly high esteem, owing to my vast knowledge. In fact, once I was invited to the College of Mysteries itself. But I prefer to think of Absalom not as home, but headquarters, where I go to plan my next adventure. I visited every country worth mentioning in Navistan and Garund. I've even trodden to the exotic lands of Tianxia. I've seen miracles you couldn't even imagine, and in every place I've been, there was a home that would have gladly received a renowned explorer such as myself. Humble. The famous name of Jubilost Narthropple is known even in the most remote corners of the world. Still, where were you born? You know, the line between persistence and importunity is very thin, and you risk crossing that line. Jubilost sighs. Do you think I haven't mentioned my birthplace because of my forgetfulness? I was born in Taldor, if you must know. The Empire is in decline these days, but still cherishes the illusion of its past glory. It's a country torn by prejudice. In Taldor, my mind was trapped in a cage of restrictions, birthright, poverty, and their beggars-be-damned attitude. I left the country as soon as I understood it. So, if you ever try to rekindle any patriotic feelings in me, you'll be disappointed. My first article in the Independence was about Taldor. The magazine was almost closed as a result of the scandal that followed, and it would have closed were it not for crowds of my supporters marching in protest under the windows of the publishing house, making its editors change their minds. Yes, that definitely sounds like something that really happened. You've traveled so much. Tell me of your travels abroad. Jubilost tilts his head, peering at you. I've written a fair number of articles and essays in my journeys, and if you'll excuse me, I haven't the slightest desire to retell them all to you right now. If you wish to learn about foreign lands, pick up any issue of The Independence and read all you like. I'm sure you can find my magazines, even in this hole of a place. Wow, okay. So, you write books and magazine articles? I certainly do. I'm too generous not to share my thoughts and journeys with other minds who search for knowledge. Judging from your face, You don't belong in that category. Jubilost sighs. Jubilost, I will kill you. Among my scientific works, I'd recommend the range of articles published in National Alchemy. If you prefer lighter reading, you might like Traveler's Essays or the scandalous The Independents. If pictures capture your attention better than words, page through the illustrated Atlas of Avestan. And you should give your cook a volume or two of my culinary almanacs. Trust me, it might help. Jubilost throws a speculative look at you. Some have tried to blame me for a sleazy romance novel called The 5 Sins of Sarenrae. I have no idea on who spread these crazy rumors. But if you like such frivolity, I've been informed that the novel's sequel, The 6th Sin, was recently published. Subtle. Very subtle. You wear glasses. Why won't you ask some cleric to heal your eyesight? Jubilost throws a cutting glance at you. I'm sure you could have figured out the answer to that question on your own, if you bothered to use a logical approach. At least I sincerely hope so. I prefer to think of you as of a lazy person, not a stupid one. Jubilost tightens his lips. Well then, I suppose it's my fate to enlighten you. All right, there's no time like the present. Let's build up to a logical conclusion together. So, starting with the obvious. A cleric's services cost several hundred gold coins. Spectacles cost a dozen gold coins. So maybe I just couldn't afford to pay the cleric. Incorrect conclusion. I earn enough. Besides, some cleric would surely help me free of charge, because they're fans of my incomparable talent. The answer can't be the money, then. So what is it? Let's explore further. Surely you've noticed that I'm a rather famous person? Just to be clear which circles I'm famous in, my scientific articles are well known among the students and teachers of various institutions of higher education. My articles that satirize the rich and powerful are extremely popular among the minor nobility, traders, and workers. That is, among anyone who doesn't have any power for themselves. The kind of people who don't usually have enough money to afford an expensive cleric. Well, can you add it all up and find the right answer yet? Jubilost doesn't let you get a single word in edgewise. Apparently, he's uninterested in your reaction, and is just enjoying listening to his own voice. My spectacles are something that unites me with my readers. People are more open to those who share their social status. Many of my readers can't afford to heal their eyesight at the temple, so when I, too, refuse such healing, I become closer to the people. My spectacles are part of my image. Jubilost exhales at last. I believe I've managed to explain the basics of logical thinking. No need to thank me. Thank you for telling me about yourself. Let me ask you about something else. Anything else. Jubilost casually waves his hand. Ask away. Tell me something about the history of the gnome race. What have I come to? Jubilost Narthropple, famous explorer, writer, and scientist, is reduced to giving simple lessons in history. Very well, ask away. What questions do you have? How did gnomes appear on Golarion? I assume you were spawned in some sort of pit, or... They came here in ancient times from the First World. You do know what the First World is, right? If you don't, ask about it some other time. I used to lecture on it at a couple of institutes. According to the understanding I've accumulated, the gnomes were an immortal race until some of our especially insightful ancestors came up with a brilliant idea. They decided it would be fun to learn how it feels to be mortal. I would like very much to meet those gnomes. I wouldn't even kick them. I just look in their eyes without a single word. Too bad they're all long dead by now. As everyone knows, a stupid enough idea can be extremely contagious. So the gnomes caught this infection, all of them, without a hope for cure. So they found a way to Golarion and decided to settle here. And you'll never believe it, they got just what they wanted. They severed their link with the First World. They gained mortality, the bleaching, and a heap of local diseases that have been keeping our race on the verge of extinction ever since. Wow, that's a lot to unpack. Do gnomes live long? Certainly, long and happily ever after. Jubilost shakes his head in remorse. We'd live as long as elves, were it not for the bleaching. That's the curse of our race, which only struck after the gnomes left the First World. To put it simply, gnomes must constantly have new experiences. If a gnome gets into a rut, so to speak, he bleaches. We start to lose color, literally. Our skin and hair become pale, and the worst thing is that our soul loses color too. If the process continues unchecked, the gnome dies. History recalls only a few cases where gnomes actually died of old age. Most of them perish either because of the bleaching, or in the middle of some crazy adventure they've joined, just to stave it off. So, you travel so much as a way to fend off the bleaching? Jubilost stares at you, then nods slowly. You see, I enjoy being alive. I like to eat pancakes in the morning. I like to write articles for magazines. I like it when I leave the publishing house in Absalom and a crowd of fans immediately mobs me. So I don't intend to die at the peak of my life because of some stupid, ancient curse. But don't you dare imagine that everything I do is just for fear of the bleaching. I tell people the truth about the world that surrounds them. My theoretical research aids in development of different branches of science in various institutes. Yes, sooner or later I'll bleach and die, like any other gnome. But the name of the famous Jubilost Narthropple will live throughout the ages. That's actually pretty fascinating. Let's change the subject. I'd like to learn more about the First World. Well, you've asked the right person. I am an expert in studying the First World. Give me your questions. The First World, what's it like? It's huge, wild, and extremely unfriendly to the unprepared traveler. Nothing remains constant there. Matter changes before your eyes. What was a mountain yesterday becomes a river today, and that river flows upwards. The trees touch the sky, the heat of the desert can melt metal, and hurricane winds can tear a person apart. Lovely. But it would be wrong to think of the First World as the plane of total destruction. Creation is just as important there. The deserts spring alive into forests, and when the hurricane subsides, animals emerge from hiding. Huge, wild, as untamed as the world itself. The First World epitomizes life in its original, chaotic meaning. There's a theory that gods use the First World as a training ground to practice their ability to create matter. They then abandoned the First World to its own fate, and wandered off to create Golarion. Some say that the inhabitants of the First World still hold a grudge against the gods for this. Intriguing. How can a person get there? Mainly through magic portals, created by skilled magicians. But the price of such a portal is usually in excess of several thousand gold coins. There is another way, of course. There are documented cases where spontaneous portals to the First World have opened in remote places on Golarion. where, as mages say, the boundaries between the two worlds has grown thin. But spontaneous portals are rather dangerous. You never know what's lurking on the other side. Only desperate adventurers and madmen use them. And, of course, romantic suicidal idiots who think that good common sense is too boring. Yeah, that sounds like us. Are there any sentient beings in the first world? Of course, the Fae, and all their relatives and all their relatives' relatives, and then some more Fae besides. Sometimes one meets leprechauns or satyrs there, which are actually another type of Fae, just called by another name, and all of them are immortal, by the way, at least within their own home world. The souls of the creatures of the first world have no connection with the realm of mortals. When a creature of the first world dies, its soul just materializes in another body, similar to its old one. It's not a pleasant experience, and the resurrected creature loses almost all of the powers and abilities it developed over its life, but keeps all its memories and personality. It's still much better than a mortal death, I would say. Sometimes the process doesn't even take long. A killer might meet his victim again the following week. Naturally, this immortality has influenced the way First World inhabitants think. For instance, Fae enjoy mischief and tricks that can easily end in someone's death. The Fae think it's just funny, and anyone from another world who falls victim to such tricks doesn't end up having much to say at all. So we have seen. Once, the gnomes were immortal relatives of the Fae. Jubilost sighs. Who rules the first world? It's commonly assumed that the eldest rule it. They are overseers, but more just a glorified version of Fae lords. Power attracts pompous blockheads in every world. Is that so? What are you hinting at? I'm only fulfilling my duty. Jubilost stares at you with interest. Yes, duty. Protecting your subjects and restoring order. Objectives so noble I could weep. Unfortunately, noble objectives can coexist perfectly happily with pompous blockheads. Are you quite sure you're not one of those? But let's get back to the first world. The eldest possess the power to keep matter in the first world in a more or less constant state. That's why the Fae treat them as demigods and offer them prayers, just as we offer prayers to Desna, Erastil, or even Lamashtu. Intriguing. Very intriguing. A lot of this might actually become relevant in the future. You know a lot about the First World. Have you ever been there? Jubilost wrinkles his lips. I haven't the opportunity yet, unfortunately. My studies of the First World are limited to the confused statements of witnesses or scribbles in their diaries. Also, I've studied the remains of some unfortunates who periodically fall out of spontaneous portals. I keep to the hope that sooner or later I'll manage to visit that wonderful place. And certainly the notes I'd write on the place would be far more extensive and informative than all the ramblings on the subject I've had to wade through. Naturally, the main concern of my expedition would be the safety of its leader, namely me. It would be extremely foolish to go that far and see that much, only to lose the chance to tell anyone about it. Of course. I'd like to talk about something else now. Yes, ask away. Tell me, why have you studied the First World so thoroughly? Jubilost looks at you for several moments, his eyes narrow. I told you already, I like to be alive. I assure you, other gnomes share the same attitude. Between the bleaching, disease, and old age, we have a lot to yearn for. But the ancient gnomes, for some reason, decided that mortality, the bleaching, and all the diseases of Golarion are preferable to the immortality of the First World. I can't do anything to change that, but I can do something with my own life. I want to find a way back to the First World for all the gnomes of Golarion. Unfortunately, to do this, I can't just gather up all the gnomes and send them marching through the nearest portal. We're too attached to Golarion now. We've lost our connection with the chaos of the First World. We've become too mortal, if you see what I mean. When a gnome dies in the First World, he dies forever, like any visitor. But there must be something that can be done to solve this problem. And I intend to find out what it is. Jubilost Narthropple, the hero who returned the gnomes home. It has a nice ring to it, wouldn't you say? And here I was thinking you were actually being noble. Silly me. I've read your article about the barony. Should I be flattered? Flattery is entirely foreign to my works. Everything that I write is the absolute truth, and never intended to satisfy egos. Jubilost looks at you over his glasses. But in case you were wondering, yes, I'm impressed with what you've done. Wow, thank you. You know, you're not very friendly, you know. Do you think so? Jubilost looks at you above his glasses. Why ever not, if I may ask? Perhaps you confuse superficially friendly words with genuinely friendly intentions. Believe it or not, I wish you only well. As a proof of that, I can point to the fact that I travel with you, and that I'm talking to you right here and now. Tell me, which do you value more? An artificial smile, or an honest attitude, bolstered by friendly advice and assistance? Fair enough. Very well. You can behave as you like. I thank you for this permission. Can I have it in writing, in case you forget someday? All right, Jubilost. Thank you for the conversation. I have to go now. Come back when you run out of clever ideas again. Oh boy. You know, I actually really like Jubilost. I think he might be one of my favorite companions. If not for the simple fact that Silverleaf is already an alchemist, I'd probably have him as a permanent fixture in my party. I mean, we could benefit from having multiple alchemists in the same party, but it would be a bit too redundant for my taste. We're already pretty heavy on strikers as it is, and who would you actually replace? But that said, we will have plenty of excuses to actually include him in our party in various special quests in the future. Especially for his personal quest, which I don't believe we've actually started just yet. At any rate, I think we're just about done with Jubilost for the time being, so let's hit the pause button for now, and I will start plotting out which of our companions we should chat with next. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. See you next time. Oh, and remember, although I do love playing Pathfinder Kingmaker, you can find out more about the game by visiting the official website. the official YouTube and Twitch channels, the official social media feeds, or the official store page over on Steam or on GOG. Links are in the description.